A word that probably takes you back to a magical time. A time where computer screens looked sleek, glossy, transparent, with app icons looking like something you could click in real life. I mean, if I had to describe peak Aero, it would be the Windows XP wallpaper with Windows 7 UI elements and these weird Y2K app windows. Windows was the one who popularized Frutiger Aero, and these images probably take you back to 2000 to 2010. It wasn't just Windows though. It was in the Wii, the PS3, the Xbox 360, Linux desktops, TV commercials, even freaking dentist offices. But in one fell swoop, the entire industry abandoned it, calling it childish and immature. No, what we need is boring flat design with no soul or funk. Just corporate straight to the point logos because we don't have fun around here. It's only now that companies realize, hey, this design sucks. And now we're bringing it back with liquid glass. So join me as I try to answer the question, what the f was Aero? So what is Aero and what is Frutiger Aero? Well, Aero is pure Windows. With the release of Windows Vista, we were blessed with the beautiful Aero theme, but it really became popular with Windows 7. Aero is the transparency, the glossiness, the realistic UI elements you see all over your screen. Frutiger Aero is a broader term that includes Aero, like duh is the name. This includes other UIs of the 2000s, TV commercials, architectural choices, and so on. The name comes from two parts. The Frutiger comes from the font made by Adrian Frutiger called Frutiger. Say Frutiger one more time here, I dare you. The Aero comes from Windows Aero, which was also hella popular. Some people call it an aesthetic, but I think it's a whole ass vibe. Think mixing nature with technology. Which is why these images are considered Frutiger Aero. This was a time of optimism where technology was going mainstream, but in order not to scare people, and by people I mean old people, our technology was made to mimic real life things. Which is why UI elements are glass, app icons look like real things, and the folder icons look like real folders. People had this idea that the future was gonna look like computers mixed with trees, grass, and sunshine. Well, that didn't happen. But when is the Frutiger Aero era? Frutiger Aero era. Well, it roughly starts at the turn of the century, so about 2001, and its death begins around 2012 with the release of Windows 8. Around the time Windows 8 came around, you saw everyone shift away from this beautiful utopia we had built to this flat, lifeless, dull corporate design, which I can't stand. This video is sponsored by Eufy. So Eufy is a smart home brand who makes all kinds of futuristic products. The two key products I want to share with you today are the Eufy S1 Pro Robot Vacuum and the Eufy Cam S4 Security Camera. The Eufy S1 Pro is the only auto vacuum you'll ever need. Kinda cool having a robot vacuum your floors. If you use my code S1 Pro 800 off, you'll get $800 off your purchase. And the Eufy Cam S4 is a 4K security camera that needs no wires or even a power outlet. It can actually power itself through solar energy. You'll get 15% off if you use my code S4KOC. Eufy is also running a crazy Black Friday sale. The early access sale is from November 6th to November 19th, where you could get up to $350 off gift cards. But the main sale is from November 20th to December 1st. You can get up to $1,100 off. This won't last for long, so make sure to check out the links in the description for Eufy's Black Friday deals, and thank you again to Eufy for sponsoring this video. Now, Windows did popularize Frutiger Aero, and they ended it, but who actually started it? Well, like always, everything Windows does was copied from a Mac. So by the end of the 90s, Mac OS 9 was... well, it looked like shit. It's honestly jarring to use in 2025, and ugly. It was clear that we needed a massive revamp, and that's when Steve Jobs introduced Mac OS 10 and its beautiful UI, Aqua. One of the design goals was they wanted to make it look so good that you wanted to lick it, which mission accomplished, I want to lick. Like, tell me these buttons don't look like delicious pieces of candy you just want to like... It wasn't just the buttons though. It was the first time you had this liquidy wallpaper, this translucent dock. Everything was a smooth animation, and it came at a cost. The first Mac OS 10 where this was introduced was slow as hell. It was highly unstable. If they're pretty, they're usually unstable. Apple quickly had to upgrade their OS with Mac OS 10.1. But going forward, the OS did stabilize, and it became even more Frutiger Aero. I especially love the brushed aluminum look on the windows, the little bluish Apple logo, and the textured dock. Apple stayed pretty consistent with this design language until 2013. Now let's talk about the most popular contributor to Frutiger Aero, Windows Aero. I would classify the Frutiger Aero era not from Windows Vista, but from Windows XP. The idea of realistic UI elements actually started here, with this soft, mushy, toy-like taskbar taskbar that Windows XP had. It feels like clay, like I could touch it and it would like bend. Everything had a toyish but somewhat real feel. And of course, this is coupled with the iconic Bliss wallpaper that defined Frutiger Aero. Just search up Frutiger Aero on Google Images and you'll basically get variations of the Windows XP wallpaper. But Microsoft started experimenting with Aero as soon as 2003. So a bit of backstory, Windows Vista, the successor to Windows XP, was actually supposed to come out in 2002, but it ended up launching in 2007. However, since this was the peak of the Frutiger Aero era, all the beta builds from 2001 to 2007 have this transparent look. Some, by the way, are completely different from what we ended up getting, but all of them are unmistakably Frutiger Aero. It was clear that Microsoft was locked in on Aero, because even when they scrapped development and restarted, the new beta builds still had Aero. And when Windows Vista dropped, that's when Frutiger Aero hit the mainstream. There was no going back now. Everything had Aero. Even the packaging that Vista came in, because this was 2007 and everything came on DVDs. In my personal opinion, to this day, Vista has one of the most beautiful UIs I've ever seen. It has the right amount of transparency. I love these glossy widgets, the glass-like taskbar that seems so delicate, and the green Aurora wallpaper. However, if you were using Windows Vista in 2007, you had a different opinion. Like macOS, Windows Aero made your computer extremely unstable. The system requirements were at least 1 GB of RAM and 128 gigabytes of GPU memory, which sounds alright now, but it was ridiculous back then. And keep in mind, these were the minimum requirements. Your computer wouldn't bat an eye today, but in 2007, rendering even simple transparency effects would slow your computer down. I remember shutting off all the Aero effects before launching GTA 4, which wouldn't help because it ran like shit anyways, but you get the point. 2007 just wasn't ready for such an advanced, difficult to render UI, and it showed, cause Vista flopped hard. But Microsoft didn't abandon Aero. There was no doubt that people liked the aesthetic, just not the performance cost. So when Windows 7 was launched in 2009, Aero was back in full force. There was even more transparency, and we had this blue futuristic aesthetic that was the default. This solidified the peak of the Frutiger Aero era. Computers were not fast enough to run this decently. Ordinary people could finally experience it, and given Windows 7's popularity, Frutiger Aero had finally become mainstream. But even though Microsoft was the one to bring Frutiger Aero to the masses, it was also the one to put a bullet in it. Windows 8 was supposed to be revolutionary and future-proof, and for this they killed off Windows Aero in favor of a new design language called Metro. This was the beginning of the flat, dull, lifeless design language that we still have today. And that's why I hate Windows 8. Windows 8 was a massive flop, but Microsoft stuck by the Metro design language again for Windows 10. By 2015, the entire industry had moved on to this flat minimalist design, and Windows 10 was so successful that it made flat minimalist design ubiquitous. But while Microsoft popularized Frutiger Aero, it wasn't the only one. The biggest contributor, in my opinion, is the iPhone. From iOS 1 to 6, Apple fully embraced the Frutiger Aero aesthetic. Every app icon had this glossy reflection and dropped a subtle shadow. Your app sat on top of this reflective gray dock. The wallpapers were always water, grass, nature, or something real. As the iPhone got more popular, Apple doubled down on these elements. It became easier to render shadows, transparency, and reflections. The iBooks app looked like a real bookshelf. The Notes app actually looked like a notepad with pages. Then there were the gaming consoles of this era. The Xbox 360 launched with the Blades dashboard, which had this glossy finish and this liquidy wallpaper that was constantly animated. The buttons were undeniably inspired by Apple's Aqua interface. Everything dropped a subtle shadow. The PS3 had the XMB, or the cross media bar. As soon as you booted it up, it had this Windows Vista-like background that constantly flowed. Everything had a glossy sheen. And the most popular console of the time, the Wii. Since it was the weakest console of this generation, its glossy transparency effects are kind of muted in comparison, but it was still considered part of the Frutiger Aero aesthetic. Basically, every piece of technology you used had Frutiger Aero. And so far, we've been talking about Frutiger Aero as if it was just a visual aesthetic, but I think a vibe is a more accurate description because we also want to include music in this. There's a specific Frutiger Aero sound from the 2000s. An accurate example is the Windows XP installation music that is playing right now. It usually consists of glassy chimes and mallet tones mixed with synth pads and electric pianos to represent the mixture between nature and technology. It usually gives calm, ambient, hopeful vibes. And this includes the sound effects. The Windows XP startup is hopeful, peaceful, with the main piano backed by an ambient synth. The Windows 7 startup doubles down on this, making it sound even more ambient. It almost sounds glassy, if that's an adjective, and the synth makes it sound like it's glowing. It's the same words I would use to describe the visual aesthetic. Even the error sounds and the other system sounds carry on with this vibe. The PS3 startup also had this ambient glass-like vibe that went along with the visuals. The Wii? Well, I don't know if this is Frutiger Aero music. The Wii just had banging music. So all was well, the future was bright, everyone was on board with this Frutiger Aero vibe, then what happened? Well, like I said, Microsoft was the first one to kill off Frutiger Aero with Windows 8. They did the same on the Xbox 360, slowly getting rid of the style with successive updates. Apple followed suit, first with iOS, completely getting rid of all Frutiger Aero aesthetics and replacing them with a flat, lifeless design on iOS 7. macOS Mavericks was the last desktop OS to have the Aqua style, but with one update, macOS Yosemite completely discarded Aqua. Android introduced Material Design in 2014, which again was a flat minimalist design. One by one, every company removed the Aero look for a flat look. Suddenly, the old design was outdated. Any company that didn't update their logo would be looked at as behind the times. Us who were living through these times were actually excited by the change, not realizing that everything was getting worse. But since it was new, it went unnoticed. I always thought that Windows 10 had a really ugly flat UI. Windows 7 was the peak of UI in my opinion, and Microsoft should give an option to bring it back. All of this happened in a span of 2 years, by the way. It literally disappeared overnight, but why? I really don't know. It seems that it was only Microsoft that decided that Frutiger Aero was outdated, and everyone else just jumped on the bandwagon. And if enough companies jump ship, you don't want to be the only one left behind. Apple, to some degree, might have made the change from their own internal politics. Scott Forstall, the guy who created iOS, was a really big fan of skeuomorphism, or realistic design. However, after his exit in 2012, Johnny Ive started exerting more control, and he was a big fan of minimalism. So starting in 2013, everything went flat minimalist. By 2014, Frutiger Aero was a thing of the past. It was actually only in 2017 where the term Frutiger Aero was coined. We didn't call it anything before then, it was just the default aesthetic. But in 2023, there was a resurgence, a nostalgia for the Frutiger Aero era. This music was everywhere with slideshows of nostalgic tech. It definitely worked on me because I'm out here making this video, innit? And it wasn't just limited to TikTok. Apple has basically brought back Frutiger Aero with liquid glass. It's actually inspired by the Vision Pro, but nevertheless. This time it's a lot more complicated because it's not straight up transparency. It warps whatever's behind it like real frosted glass. Your 2007 Vista PC would explode from the GPU strain. Interestingly though, people didn't exactly have a positive reaction to it, and Apple has slowly started to roll back the transparency effects. So perhaps it's just a select few like me who are nostalgic for the Frutiger Aero era, but you know, whatever. But I want to hear what you think about Aero or Frutiger Aero, and what's your favorite aesthetic? Comment down below, and if you aren't subscribed, what are you doing? Subscribe now! Nah, but seriously, I would appreciate it, and peace.